There is a moment before every storm when the world holds its breath. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of waiting. The kind that presses against the chest and makes the heart listen. In the land once called Dahomey, this silence came often. It arrived at dawn, when the mist still rested on the red earth and the palace walls of Agojie stood like quiet witnesses to what would follow. In those moments, the kingdom did not look like power. It looked like patience. Then came the sound of feet. Not hurried, not scattered, but measured, unified. Women moving together as one body, one purpose. Their faces were calm. Their eyes were steady. They did not speak much. They did not need to. Europe would later call them Amazons. The world would call them legends. But they had a simpler name for themselves. Agojie, the wives of the king, the daughters of Dahomey. They were not born as myth. They were shaped by discipline, by oath, by memory. And before they ever lifted a blade, before they ever faced an enemy, they first learned how to stand in silence. This is their story, not of fantasy, but of courage, order, and the quiet power of women who refused to be small in a world that expected them to disappear. Long before maps were drawn by foreign hands, Dahomey was already a state, not a loose gathering of villages, but a carefully ordered world. Its heart was Agojie, a city of walls and courtyards, where kings ruled with absolute authority and tradition moved like law. Power in Dahomey was not loud. It was structured. Every role had meaning. Every ritual had purpose. Farmers, artisans, priests, soldiers, and royalty all moved within a system that believed survival depended on discipline. The king was not only a ruler. He was the bridge between the living and the ancestors. His word carried weight not because of fear alone, but because it was believed to echo the will of those who came before. Dahomey grew strong not by chance, but by design. It trained its people to obey order and to protect identity. In a world of shifting alliances and rival states, Dahomey chose structure over chaos. And within that structure, something unusual happened. Women were not pushed aside. They were trained forward. From the center of the palace, from the deepest traditions of loyalty and service, a new force would rise. One that would challenge the meaning of power itself. Their name would be Agojie. The Agojie did not begin as soldiers. They began as hunters. Women trained to move through forest and shadow, to track animals with patience, to strike only when the moment was right. In a land where survival depended on awareness, these women learned to read the earth, the wind, the silence between sounds. At first, they were assigned to guard the palace, not as decoration, but as protection. The king watched them closely. He saw discipline in their posture, focus in their eyes, loyalty in their obedience. He saw something rare, so he changed their purpose. They were given weapons, not symbols, but tools of war. They were trained not just to protect, but to confront. Not just to watch, but to lead the front line. To become Agojie was not a choice. It was a calling shaped by the state. Girls were selected young. Some volunteered. Some were given. All were transformed. They took vows. No marriage. No children. No life outside the kingdom. Their identity was no longer individual. It became collective. Their family was Dahomey. Their loyalty was absolute. Their future was uncertain, but their strength was undeniable. The Agojie woke before the sun. While the city still slept, they ran. Barefoot across stone, across thorn, across red dust that clung to skin and memory. Their training was not gentle. It was deliberate. Pain was not avoided. It was understood. They climbed walls. They marched for hours. They practiced with blades and muskets. They learned to move as one body, to breathe in the same rhythm, to strike without hesitation. But their life was not only battle. They ate together, slept together, prayed together. Their voices blended in song at night, not of fear, but of belonging. In a world where women were often defined by family or marriage, the Agojie were defined by purpose. They were taught restraint as much as violence, to control emotion, to carry dignity into every movement. Even in laughter, they remained aware of who they were. They were not allowed to be careless with themselves or with history. In their daily life, discipline became devotion, and devotion became identity. To be Agojie was not something you did. It was something you were. Before the Agojie ever faced an enemy, they faced the unseen. They swore oaths not only to the king, but to the spirits of the land, to Vodun, to ancestors whose names were spoken in firelight and silence. These were not symbolic rituals. They were binding. The Agojie believed that strength without spirit was empty, so they trained the body and the soul together. Before battle, they fasted. They prayed. They stood in circles and called on protection, courage, and clarity. They believed fear could be disciplined just like muscle. Their oaths were strict. No betrayal. No retreat without command. No dishonor. Breaking the code did not only mean punishment. It meant spiritual separation. To lose your place among the Agojie was to lose your meaning in the world. They wore their identity like armor, not for appearance, but for purpose. Their rituals taught them that death was not the end, that memory would hold them if the body could not. And so they walked into battle not as women afraid to die, but as warriors prepared to be remembered. The Agojie were not trained for ceremony. They were trained for war. From the early 1700s to the late 1800s, they marched wherever Dahomey's survival or ambition demanded. They were not symbols. They were shock troops, disciplined, fearless, and loyal beyond question. In 1727, under King Agojie, Dahomey attacked the coastal kingdom of Ouida. Ouida controlled trade routes to the Atlantic. The Agojie fought in the assault that broke its walls and absorbed the city into Dahomey. With Ouida fell a major power, and with it rose Dahomey's influence. In 1892, under King Behanzin, the Agojie fought at the Battle of Adagon. In a single battle at Adagon in 1892, it's recorded that 417 Agojie warriors fell, many in hand-to-hand combat against French bayonets. Observers later wrote that they advanced without breaking formation, even as casualties mounted. But the Agojie's greatest test did not come from Europe first. It came from Abeokuta. Abeokuta was a powerful Yoruba city-state in present-day Nigeria. It was protected by rocky hills and thick walls. It was well-armed, and it refused to submit. In 1851, King Gizo led Dahomey's first major invasion of Abeokuta. The Agojie were placed at the front. They advanced into musket fire. They charged stone defenses. They fought from dawn until heat and blood blurred the air. But Abeokuta did not fall. The terrain favored the defenders. Dahomey suffered heavy losses. For the first time in decades, the Agojie were forced to retreat. Still, Dahomey did not accept defeat. In 1864, under King Gliel, Dahomey attacked Abeokuta again. Once more, the Agojie marched first. Once more, they charged fortified rock positions and gunfire. Once more, they were repelled. These defeats marked a turning point. Dahomey's expansion stopped. Its power met its limits. After Abeokuta, the Agojie turned to a new and dangerous frontier, Europe. In 1890, the First Franco-Dahomeyan War began. France moved to control Cotonou and Porto Novo. The Agojie raided French camps and fought in open battle despite facing rifles and artillery. In 1892 to 1894, the Second Franco-Dahomeyan War ended everything. At Dagba, Achukpa, and Kana, the Agojie launched frontal assaults against machine guns. At Kana, they charged again and again, even as ranks fell. They did not fight because they thought they would win. They fought because retreat was not their language. By 1894, Abomey fell. King Behanzin was exiled, and the Agojie were disbanded. When Europeans encountered the Agojie, they did not know how to describe them. They wrote with fascination, with fear, with confusion. Women were not supposed to stand like this, not supposed to command like this, not supposed to fight without apology. Some called them monsters. Some called them miracles. Some tried to turn them into myth so they would not have to face them as reality. European soldiers spoke of their discipline, of their silence, of their refusal to break under pressure. The Agojie unsettled them because they challenged every idea of gender, power, and civilization Europe believed it owned. But admiration did not stop invasion. Colonial ambition does not pause for respect. Europe did not come to understand Dahomey. It came to control it. And the Agojie stood in the way, not because they hated the outside world, but because they loved their own. History is never simple. Dahomey was brave, but Dahomey was also complicated. The kingdom participated in the Atlantic slave trade. It captured enemies and sold them. The Agojie sometimes enforced these systems. They protected power, even when power was imperfect. This does not erase their courage, but it deepens the story. Strength can exist beside harm. Loyalty can serve systems that are flawed. The Agojie were disciplined warriors, but they were also part of a world shaped by survival, fear, and ambition. To understand them fully, we must hold both truths. They were powerful, and they were human. They lived in a time where choices were shaped by pressure, not purity. And history asks us not to judge too quickly, but to listen carefully. Dahomey fell. French forces took Dahomey. The palace burned. The king was exiled. And the Agojie were disbanded. Not in one dramatic moment, but in silence. Slowly, unceremoniously. Their weapons were taken. Their structure dissolved. Their identity stripped. Some returned to villages. Some lived in shadows. Some carried memory alone. A force that once stood at the front of history was now asked to disappear. But memory does not obey orders. Even when their world collapsed, the Agojie remained alive in stories, in posture, in songs, in the way old women stood with their backs straight and their eyes steady. Dahomey was gone, but its daughters were not. Today, Dahomey still stands. Its walls are quieter. Its courtyards hold dust instead of ceremony. But if you walk slowly, you can still feel it. You can hear footsteps that are no longer there. The Agojie live now in memory, in archives, in whispered family stories, in films and books that try to capture their fire. But no image can fully hold what they were. They were not a spectacle. They were a system of belief. They believed in duty over comfort, in identity over fear, in standing firm when the world demanded collapse. Their legacy is not only in battles. It is in the idea that womanhood does not have one shape. It can be gentle, it can be fierce, and it can carry a nation. True strength is not always loud. It does not always conquer. It does not always survive in buildings or flags. Sometimes, it survives only in memory. The Agojie did not rule the world, but they refused to be erased by it. They stood in a time that did not expect them. They fought in a world that underestimated them. And even when their kingdom fell, their courage did not. They teach us that power is not domination. Power is devotion. To a people, to a purpose, to a truth worth protecting. And memory is the final battlefield. If we forget them, they fall again. If we remember them, they rise. The Agojie remind us that history is not only written by victors, but by those brave enough to stand when standing was dangerous. Their story is not finished. It is waiting to be remembered. Kindly subscribe and turn on the notification button to this YouTube channel. Thank you.